G'day and welcome to Cuba de Rio. I'm Matt Scollay. And it has been a while, guys. That Christmas New Year's hiatus sadly extended itself into mid-December. And there were multiple reasons for this. I was having an awesome time, and I also had difficulties finding an interviewee, as I was spending an awful lot of my time with Chileans and non-English speakers. I really have limited this podcast by speaking to English speakers only, because I definitely met a few people that were interview worthy, but were Spanish speakers in this last month. But let's get cracking with the episode, because it's a long one. So we start all the way down in the bottom of Chile in a town called Chile Chico, riding the Carretera Austral all the way up to midpoint of Chile. So basically we're riding from the bottom third of Chile all the way up to about midway in the piece. It's a big ride, and we go from here all the way to Christmas in Santiago. Well, yesterday I experienced one of the most incredible 18-hour periods of my entire trip to date, and it goes like this. I got to the town of Puyuhuapi at about 10 o'clock at night, which here is still light. The sun is only set at about 10 o'clock at night, and the twilight lasts for at least another 45 minutes. And I got to town, and I was wandering around looking for accommodation, and there was absolutely no one here. And Puyuhuapi is this gorgeous little town at the end of a fjord, and slowly I became attracted by this noise in the distance, and it sort of made my way there. And what was there was this entire town gathering just around this one event. It's called the Telethon. And we have telethons in Australia, but it's nothing on the scale of the telethon here in Chile, which is a 2-day mega event raising money for disabled children and building facilities for them. And this was just an amazing thing. The whole town was out. All the people that run hostels here were not in their beds, and so I couldn't check myself in. And so within seconds I found myself holding hands with the entire town, looping the plaza block before we all joined again in this concert scenario, which was emceed by the town's one and only transvestite, which was a fantastic sign. Except that many of the men who were drunk at this point were heckling the entire time. But she was doing a fantastic job at emceeing the whole show. And then I finally got a hostel, and I woke up the next morning early to make my way to this place. And what it's called is the Ventisquero Colgante, and it is just surrounded by this most incredible forest, as are to all the hills here in the south of Chile. It's just gorgeous. And you get to the Ventisquero Colgante and you hear things like this. And this is not your sort of usual glacial setup of some gorgeous ancient giants sliding into the ocean and slowly peeling away to become icebergs. This is whole-scale glacial suicide. And the Ventisquero Colgante is this hanging glacier. Colgante means hanging in Spanish. And it's just got this drop of about 200 meters beneath where the ice is up there, and this huge waterfall that you could hear the entire time that you stood there. And it was just letting fly berg after berg, which were just cascading down and creating these huge thunderous noises as they smashed on the rocks below. Genuinely one of the most tragic and impressive things I've seen on the trip to date, just watching these things come down. From there, it was a quick hitchhike to another place down the road. On the way, just casually seeing dolphins in the fjordlands here. It's the Quelat fjord that we're bordering here in Puyuhuapi, and there was just bottlenose dolphins chilling off the coast. So I saw a glacier, I saw bottlenose dolphins, and then I went to the enchanted forest, which was gorgeous. Again, moss-covered trees, just lovely, cool air everywhere, and you do this little 2-kilometer trail up to yet another glacier. So I sandwiched dolphins with glaciers, and the whole time you're wandering through this forest, you just get this amazing sense of being in this magical land. Even if you're listening closely, you can hear fairies in the distance.
10 months travelling and you still can't grow a beard.
If you want to imagine in that sort of thing. But anyway, I have absolutely had a cracking time in Puyuhuapi, and the south of Chile is genuinely one of the highlights of the whole trip. I have not been in a place that is so soaked in beauty. It's absolutely amazing. So get yourself down here before they finish the gigantic highway that's being built through this part of the world. Undoubtedly, the easiest way of moving around the Carretera Austral was by sticking out your thumb and hitching a ride, and I was with a absolute plethora of people, but with this guy, it was my favourite. It was this ancient old dump truck, and because of all the roadworks they're doing it, you pick up a lot of truckies going along this part of the world, grabbing sand and whatever. But he was of Mapuche inheritance, and that means he had the world's teeniest, tiniest little thumbs clutching the wheel of this enormous dump truck as he was going to and from his place of work. It was just great, and he took me all the way to this place called Chaiten. And Chaiten has a rather haunting recent history, and it's most demonstrable by walking into the nearby forest. And that is the sound of 4 meters of ash falling from the 2008 eruption of the nearby volcano Chaiten, which absolutely inundated the town with lahores of hot ash and mud. And the whole town was evacuated. Only one elderly person died in the entire thing, but it has left the landscape nearby absolutely scarred. And if you walk just 20 minutes out of town, you find these huge 4-meter walls of ash, and including an entire dead forest of trees. It's a very haunting place to be. And the best thing is, you can climb up volcano Chaiten, and it's got this weird, sinister feel to it because it doesn't actually emit any noise, but it's got lots of smoke pouring out of it. And the earth there has all this champagne quality from being made of freshly made pumice, and it just sounded so fantastic under my shoes that I was enjoying this immensely, wandering over the stuff. And in addition to that, when the volcano erupted, it threw up into the air huge amounts of obsidian, which came down in shards that was sharp enough to cut my apple. And from there, I hitchhiked further north to a town called Hornopiren, where I found the most peculiar thing I think I've seen on my entire trip. And what this is 500 seagulls and other seabirds floating down a river, eating to their guts' delight, and getting to the end of the river, then flying back up to the top of the river, sitting in the river again and floating down in this ridiculous little seabird merry-go-round. And the reason for this was a bit further upstream. And I came to learn in this part of the world that Chile is now the world's second largest producer of salmon, primarily in this southern area of Chile and Patagonia. And this is the sound of a salmon farm, breeding tiny little salmons that will then be taken into cages outside. And the birds, if we can go back to their happy little squawks, were eating all the food that was being pumped out of the tanks that were used, and just ending up in the natural wildlife out there, and the birds were eating all the pellets that the baby salmons hadn't got around to. And going further north, I passed through these amazing volcanoes, amazing valleys, too much to tell you about, but we've got to get along because we need to move to Chiloe. And Chiloe is this huge island, and if you want to hear a great story, go back to the second last episode of Peru about Chiloe and the huge fishermen's blockade that they had during a strike earlier this year. But amazingly, I hopped on a boat in my first day in Chiloe in the northern end near Ancud, and we went out to see penguins. And following the advice of the guide, these are the only penguins in the whole world that live together, even though they're two different species. These are Humboldt and Magellan penguins living together. And just a little bit off the coast, we found whales. And we're not going to hang around with this because I've got so much to say. But yes, there were 2 humpback whales out in the bay delighting the tourists. And we had to pay a tiny little bit extra to spend the 20 minutes hunting them out there and taking photos and the like, of which I got none because they're bloody hard things to take photos of, these whales. But we were very much getting close to Christmas when I was in Chiloe, and I noticed a delightful little Chilean habit, or tradition perhaps, that they have coming up to Christmas. And what it was these lines and lines, groups of teenagers up and down the high street here in Chiloe, all volunteering to wrap your presents for you for a small donation of whatever you prefer. And it seems that they spend all the weeks leading up to Christmas in this manner. And they were all just happily on the street, wrapping presents, saying hi to people they hadn't seen all year. And it was just had this lovely little communal feel that I'm afraid we don't have back home, where Westfield will happily do the same service for you. And from there, I went up to visit Lewis and Maria, who are my brother's host family when he stayed with them for a year, about 2 years ago. And they are the most delightful people, and here I got the most sensational taste of the domesticity that awaits me in the year to come, because here we made bread, here we made empanadas, I made cakes, I made lunches. I just had the best time just sitting in a house with lovely people, chatting away about all sorts of politics and the likes with Lewis, and visiting the town of Valdivia, which undoubtedly the highlight would have to be these huge, enormous sea lions that stalk the edges of the fish market in town, and they are absolutely enormous. They are the biggest things I've seen on land this entire trip to date. But from Valdivia, we headed up north to dirty old Santiago, the capital of Chile, which hosts about 50% of Chile's population. 8 million people live in Santiago, and you can certainly see it. The air here is absolutely clogged with pollution, and there are a couple of days, even though I was living on the very edge of Santiago in Las Condes, there was a couple of days where I would wake up in the morning having left the window open, and my throat was absolutely coated in filth and pollution. It was nasty. And there was a couple of things in Santiago that really stood out to me in the time that I was here, in addition to lovely street entertainment in the lead up to Christmas. But there's this amazing chairlift that you can take up ridgeline, and on this ridgeline you can see 2 Santiagos. On the right hand side you can see, in the far distance where I was staying in Las Condes, in the mid-ground you've got the financial district, and then on the other side of the ridgeline you have the very much poor barrios of Santiago. And yeah, the difference could not be stark enough. The light glinting off this huge new buildings, Santiago now hosting South America's tallest building as of this year, and the tiny little tin-made shacks on the other side of the bridge definitely is a stark reminder of some of the problems that face Chile, even though it is the most developed nation in South America. But it was, of course, Christmas while I was here. And it meant that we got to go to the Night of the Candles, Noche de las Velas, and it was delightful. The church was packed out with people, and there were little moments for everyone. The children had their moment, and the families had their moment, and Christmas carols were sung with vigour. And of course, with Christmas carols, there's always those that have far too many verses, and everyone gets to the end of one verse expecting it to the end, and it's got another verse at the other way there. But it was absolutely lovely, and at one point they switched off all the lights in the place, and the whole church lit their candle from this one candle that a girl was holding, and marched out the church and sang Silent Night outside. It was absolutely spectacular. And in pure Chilean fashion, we opened our presents on the night of the 24th, and had the 25th to sleep and rest, and spend my time with the lovely family of Michaela, who we had hosted back in my home in Sydney. And her family, the Montt Claps, have been absolutely fantastic and hosted me all the way up to New Year's Eve, which we will hear in the coming episode. And I could not resist putting in a little bit of the street music from Concepcion when I was there flying through, because these guys were pretty incredible guitarists, as you can surely hear. But my guest is Mika's dad, an amazing man called Mauricio, who is a gynecologist and obstetrician in Santiago, and it was an amazing chat I had with him about his past, living in different parts of Chile, and his very quickly changing profession. So have a listen and enjoy.
Yes, I'm Mauricio Mondion. I'm from Santiago, Chile.
But where are you from originally, Mauricio?
Originally from Valdivia, a small city in the south of Chile.
And Valdivia, we've visited Valdivia in the last couple of months.
Yeah.
What was it like growing up there?
Sorry?
What was it like growing up in Valdivia?
It's difficult to answer because you don't have a comparison to decide if it was better or not better than another place. But for me, it was a huge place to be as a child. It was in the 70s, so Chile was a quite disconnected country in those years, and it was quite a poor country too. So I have a quite simple and happy childhood there. My most valuable toy was my bike.
Uh-huh.
I play in the street with my neighbors, with my classmates, and I lived in a quite protected environment in my family.
So I was wondering, were you there for the big earthquake of...
No, the birth earthquake was in 1960.
Yes.
I was born in 1966.
Oh, right.
I have a sister who was born in 1960.
Yes.
It's called the earthquake generation in Chile.
All right.
Yeah.
And how are they marked by the earthquake?
My family lived in 1960 in a house, and many houses in the neighborhood were completely destroyed.
Because it was 9.5 on the Richter
9.5,
yes.
I think is the biggest registered earthquake in the history of humankind.
Yeah.
The land descended 1.5 meters.
Wow.
It's quite difficult to imagine. When you travel there, you can see the points of the, how do you say in English, cercos?
The fence points.
Yes, under the water.
Yes,
and
in
that's
fact,
a mark of the descent of the country.
Yeah, you've got the city centre on one side of the river, and on the other side of the river you have houses that are flooded because they dropped below the water level.
Yes. And a couple of days after that, the river that crosses Valdivia is called Rio Valdivia, Rio Calle, and it comes from a lake over there in the mountains. And La Salida,
where it meets the sea.
No, where that lake, where the river is born there on a lake, was closed caused the earthquake, and the level of the lake comes day by day higher, and it was a really threat for the city because in all the lake is gonna.
So it's a natural dam formed by the earthquake.
Yes.
Oh, right.
And it was a quite effort of the country to solve that, and there was a lot of machines and engineers trying to
reduce the level of the dam without destroying the city further. That's exciting. I had not heard that part of the earthquake story.
Yeah.
But how did you say the people from the south of Chile are different from those in the north?
First, the difference is living in a small town is always different than living in a big city. So in a small city, your connection net is stronger than living in a big city, and the concept of community is stronger than in a big city. But southern in Punta Arenas, there is something quite different because they are not an island, but they live as they were an island. So they protect themselves between them, and the explanation for every problem is an enemy from outside.
Because they identify as a Magellanic people,
Yes,
don't they?
yes. And that has pros and cons, but Magallanes is quite different from the rest of Chile.
Certainly. And so what brought you from Punta Arenas up to Santiago?
When I ended the university, I got married, and we come to Santiago to study our medicine residence. My wife in pediatrician, and I'm in OBS-GYN.
An obstetrician?
Obstetrician gynecology.
Oh, right.
And we have to pay the state living and working in a small city for 3 years.
All right.
And we choose to live in Punta Arenas for 3 years because we thought that it gonna be a quite experience to live for 3 years down there in a quite different environment. And it was true. But those 3 years become 12 years.
Oh,
and,
so quite a while.
And after that, we travel to Spain to study once again for 1.5 years, and then back to Punta Arenas. And then we were getting closer to 45, 50 years old, and at that time you start thinking on other things.
Yeah.
And what you start thinking is, where do I want to live? Where I want to live, being an older person.
Yes.
And Punta Arenas is a quite difficult place to live, being old.
Yeah.
Because you are disconnected from your child and from your, how do you say, nietos in
your grandchildren.
Your grandchildren
yes.
in the future, if we have the fortune of having. And so we choose to move, thinking on 50 or 20 years
in ahead.
And what kind of relationship we want to have being 65 or 70 in terms of our children and our grandchildren.
That's pretty amazing. I always enjoy thinking long term like that. But I was wondering, why did you choose to become a gynecologist or an obstetrician? 2
reasons. The first of them is I always have a very good relation with women in terms of being a physician. I have better relations with my woman patients than with men patients. That was one of the reasons. And the other reason is this is a field where you are in some way a surgeon, but you are not only a surgeon, you always have to care about no surgical diseases. So it's a mix of both skills, and that was quite interesting for me.
It is a spectacularly challenging grey area, I feel.
Yes.
Yes, especially in South America, where the moral questions around your work in IVF and things aren't as settled as they are in Australia. So how do you deal with that side of the work?
First, you have to ask yourself which are your personal limits in terms of moral or ethics or whatever. And then once you have said that, the decision is not yours. The decision is of your patient. Your obligation is to show them the choices that medicine and technology offers them. What to do or what not to do is not my decision. What to do or not what to do is the patient decision.
That is fascinating, because I think that field is developing as fast as any other field.
Probably as fast as any other field in medicine.
But so how does your personal limits then change as the technology changes?
Because the way technology is changing with more speed is in terms of first being able to diagnose conditions in embryos.
Yep.
Now we are able to diagnose almost everything, or not everything, but we are going to be able to diagnose everything. In that comes not from physician. That knowledge comes from those boys and women working in labs. They are engineers, biologists, biochemists, and so on. But they are developing this field so fast that we are able to interchange diseases, mitochondria in embryo cells to from health cells to abnormal cells, and to have the chance to have normal embryos. Now the motivation for that development has been the search for health up to now.
Yeah.
We want health babies because their parents have some gene alterations or so on.
And that's why they come to you, because they can't conceive naturally, and so instead...
Or they can conceive naturally, but...
For the fear of passing on this gene.
But sick babies.
Yep.
But this technology allows us to, probably in a short period of time, to select characteristics of the embryo. Not only cause health search.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I was going to talk about
that.
this.
We're close to that.
Yeah.
And that changes the humankind parameter.
Yes.
Because, for example, when you get in love with a woman, you ask yourself, which genes does this woman have? Are we gonna conceive children with this IQ or with this other IQ, or is our child gonna be a top rank sport or singer or whatever?
Tall, short.
Yes, you don't ask that question up to now, but people is gonna start asking these questions when they relate it with another one.
But
and that changes everything.
It does, and it also changes I would say, some of the joy of having a child, because you know of these potential parameters in which this human could be born, but you don't know until they come out effectively and they grow up into a person. But to pre-decide those genes and say they're going to be blonde, they're going to be 6'4" at 18 years of age.
Yes, and that makes that relationships probably are gonna quite contaminated in terms of the probability of having a child with that or with that other characteristics. For example, there is a standard technique called overdonation for a woman of 40-something years old with no own eggs being in their ovaries, and we took an eggs from a healthy young woman, and we fertilized them with the sperms of the husband involved, and the embryos resulted from that procedure. We took one or two of them and we put in the uterus of the woman. And when we discuss how to select the person who is going to donate the eggs, they ask, I want them to be from university or with this list of skills and so on. And I ask, are these the same criteria you choose to select your husband?
Yeah.
And the answer is always no. So why are you ask now? I'm gonna give you the certainty that we have checked this woman for normality, nothing more than that. And this shows you that when persons are faced with the chance of selecting, they like to select.
Yes, and I think an interesting level of our consumer culture enters in that.
That's a point probably, because this put reproduction as a product to buy.
Yep. And there already is cases of this. I was listening to something of, it was actually a Radio Lab episode. I think I could find it for you later on. Okay. But it was a person that was looking for an egg donor and they were looking for a white egg donor, university educated, and the majority are all from Eastern Europe. And so effectively, like in the terms that they put it in the show, cheap white eggs, because people from Western countries aren't donating eggs at the same rate. And that horrified me that this...
And more than that, that most of these, how do you say rásicos in English?
Traces.
Traces, yes, are not genetically conditioned. They are environment conditioned. Why are you studied successfully in a university? Because you have these or these other genes? Probably not. You are a successful university student because your education, your safety as child, your love relationships inside your family, this and many other variables ends in being a successful student, not your extremely perfect genes.
No. It is fascinating.
But people think I can be programmed in this or this other direction. And this is not possible.
So I don't want to, if you're not willing to go into detail on this, we can not talk about it. But I'm wondering, how does the competition between different clinics here in Santiago, is that pushing everyone further as a group, or are there some clinics that are sticking to their moral principles in this relationship?
That's different in different countries, because in many countries all these are very hard regulated by law. What can you and what you cannot do with embryos and so on. In Chile and in many other countries we have no legal regulation. So strictly everybody can do whatever they want.
Is that because it's too much of a taboo topic for lawmakers to deal with?
No, I think this is because when you hear the congressmen talking about this, they really don't understand what they are talking about. And because we're a very Catholic society, when you talk about reproduction, what they think on is contraception, abortion, and so on. And they speak all the year around these topics in the Congress.
Yeah.
And they really don't know what is happening in the real world.
All right.
And we're working as the same with the same technology that a physician is possible to do in Australia or Europe or the United States. But the Congress and the lawmen in Chile are talking about problems 40 years ago.
Yeah. So I'm wondering then, is there a lobby group within morally concerned physicians like yourself to bring awareness to lawmakers that the technology needs boundaries?
That's going to happen when this discussion really starts in the Congress. But it doesn't start. But I have worked in 3 different clinics, IVF clinics in Chile, and in all these places, the directors have decided to be very strict with self-imposed regulation, because everybody who is starting working in IVF has 12 or 15 years of study to reach this point. So in generally, everybody is a serious man who is working here. So they try to say what is independent of having or not having laws. We are going to settle limits for our work. Not exactly the same limit in every clinic, but everybody puts themselves limits.
Yeah. I'm wondering then, because Chile is it's a modern country, and how attracted are international clinics to come to Chile to practice in this regulation-free environment?
Because for them, this is medicine, this is healthcare services, but it's also a business.
Yeah.
And this is quite an attractive place for international clinics because we are an immature market in terms of we have a huge space to growth in FBF.
Yeah. But not only here in,
No,
not
not
domestically, but continentally. A lot of
Continentally.
people come to Chile to get their procedures done and then go back to their
Ah,
countries.
no, not yet.
Not yet.
That happens, for example, in Spain, because in the north of Europe, the law regulations are very strict. For example, ovo donation is not legal in many of the North European countries, and
that explains the
and they
Eastern
come to
European
Spain or to East Europe to have the treatments and having a baby. Probably being a North European people, I probably feel more comfortable doing my treatment in Spain than in Chile, because from Denmark or from Norwegian, Chile is like I don't know, very undeveloped country,
Yeah.
and they probably have the concept that everything is unsafe and risky and so on.
Yeah.
But that happens in Spain.
Yeah.
Probably in a short period of time, that's going to happen in Chile too.
Chile as well. So I'm wondering, given that you're in a profession that like is so close to the creation of life,
Okay.
like how does it? How do you guys deal with death when that occurs within the embryos? How do you approach like the death of a patient's child or something? It's very hard.
Yeah. Yes, because when you are only oriented to success, you are not. You don't have the skills to deal with death and with unsuccess. And when you realize that you only control only a couple of variables, and the final result is not completely under your control, and you compartes, how do you say compartes?
Share.
And you share these concepts with your patients at the start of the treatment, in terms of the pregnancy or an IVF treatment. You have to, as the same way you share the path through the process, it's not difficult to share the path through the death or the negative result of the treatment, for example.
And it's still incredibly high with IVF. It's almost like 25% of...
With IVF, we are now getting close to 35-50. It has an
35-50 success.
percent success. And we started
Nice.
with 20% at the 80s. Now we are getting close to 50%. And when genetics comes to the field, we're getting closer to 75. And selected groups when genetics helps you to select a normal embryo to transfer.
Yeah, yeah. Are you? I'm fascinated to talk about this. Are you familiar with CRISPR techniques?
No.
CRISPR is a protein that you can program to go along the DNA, and it can
yes.
shut out. Yes.
This is quite new.
Yes, very
And
new.
this is gonna come to IVF in a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Probably. And if you first you have to know if genetics is the reason why your treatment was not successful.
Because that's not always the case.
it's not always the case. When it is the case, you have to identify which points of the DNA are abnormal and responsible of your unsuccessful treatment. So we still have a huge gap
to go
between that technology and the chances of having that technology helping you increase your successful rates.
So just to explain for anyone listening, it's a protein that can go along a piece of DNA and search
cleaning
out,
it,
effectively clean it. And if you reintroduce different genes in the area of where it's cleaned, the DNA will heal itself with those new genes and effectively eliminate the.
But to clean and probably to put genes inside the DNA you want to be there.
Yes.
And that is coming close to Orwell 1984.
Yeah.
To program.
To that and Gattaca. This lovely film. Yeah. So, well, let's move on from that then. What do you see the future of Chile and of Santiago and the like?
In terms of
just as a city, as
we in Chile, the only city that is increasing at a certain rate is Santiago. Many cities does not grow at all, and those cities that growth are doing it at a smaller rate in Santiago. So if this keeps doing so, we are going to be not a country, we are going to be a big city with extremely poor and small and undeveloped towns.
That was something incredible. That if you ride the chairlift here in Santiago, you can see two Santiagos on the one chairlift. On either side of this ridge that you ride along, there is incredibly poor barrier suburbs on one side, and then the financial center.
And finally, that it's a long-term unsuccessful model of development. Yeah. But nobody really knows how to stop this tendency.
Trajectory, yeah.
And because it's quite more interesting a country with 500,000 inhabitants than a country with 9 million people and only small towns around. But I really don't know how to stop this tendency, and I have not read or listened to
any
convincing idea to stopping this.
Well, we always love to end these interviews on a happy note.
Okay.
So let's talk about the Chilean Christmas, which I spent with you and your family here in Santiago. How is the Chilean Christmas different from Christmas around the rest of the world?
We are still a Christian people, a Christian country, because we have a very strong Catholic influence, and still we have for Chilean Christmas is a family celebration, and it's still a celebration in which the center is still you have beliefs in God.
Yeah.
And that's in South America in generally that is strong, and in Europe where I lived and where I spent 2 Christmas celebrations is still a celebration to eat good food and to receive some presents, and not to ask yourself why are you in a privileged situation of happiness, work, a seal over your head, and a table full of food. And we try to celebrate, trying to ask yourself why this happens. Because of your work, yes, but many people work harder than you and they don't have what you have. So it's opportunity to saying thanks. And we think we have to say thanks to God.
Certainly, and I don't think we could end this interview on a more interesting note. So thank you very much
for
coming on, and thank you very much for having me here in your home.
We are so many Australian friends now, so...
I know, at least 5.
At least 5, yeah.
All right, cheers, Mauricio.
Oh, please.
And that's it for another week, and I suspect we will only have 2 more of these as I'm gunning it down to Patagonia to do a hike with Michaela and her sister Pascal. In my second or last 2 weeks of this whole trip, and then we're returning to Santiago for my flight home. The tickets of which I've already printed them, which is it's a very strange thing, and I'm sure you will hear more of my reflections on the fact this trip is coming to a close in the next episode, because I'm not quite ready to face it just yet. But anyway, if you like what you're hearing, make sure you check out the Facebook page, because that's where all the photos of Patagonia and my time in Santiago and the rest of Chile are going up, and leave a review on iTunes, as it'll really help us out, especially as we're coming to the end of this amazing adventure. So thanks guys, and catch you later.